Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. All right. Well, hey, welcome to another Cloud Podcast. Today is a good day. We love doing podcasts on Friday because the weekend is upon us. But today we're excited to have Lindsay Pasto. She is the Director of Customer Success over at TVbeat. Lindsay, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Absolutely. It's good to have you here. And Artie, it's Friday. I think those beer taps need to be put in use later this afternoon. How you doing?
Oh, doing good. Thanks for having me on as the co-host today. Excited to learn a little bit more about CX and customer success. So let's dive right in. So Lindsay, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career path, how you got to where you are today.
Perfect. So I have been working primarily in digital advertising for the past 17 years. And really my career started working in fashion in New York, every girl's dream. And somehow I ended up in software. So it's been a long, interesting road, but I really love customer success and just always delighting our clients.
Tell us a little bit about where you are today and what you guys do. TVbeat.
Perfect. So TVbeat is a software company. We are based in London. So I'm actually one of the first and only US employees here, based in Austin. And essentially we work with large TV inventory owners and we help them harmonize all of their different data sets. So currently, they work in so many different systems. If you think about all the different types of television advertising there are out there, you have your traditional linear, digital, VOD, OTT, CTV. We all keep hearing about all of those different channels per se, all exist in different systems. And so we really get in there, get into the nitty gritty, help them harmonize their data so they can actually run their business effectively and maximize their revenues.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I love seeing like the background of having the advertising, the digital advertising, and then moving into this new realm over at TVbeat. Let's talk, you talked about liking success and just seeing how customer experience is changing. And over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a lot of changes in customer success and what it means and what it's going to look like in the next 5 years. Talk a little bit about just that evolution and how you've seen it change over the last decade or so.
Sure. And I think it's really interesting when you look at really how client experience, you now have people with titles of CXO, client experience officer, that exist out there. That wasn't the case 10 to 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. There were, hate to say it, there were account management teams that really just babysat accounts, but there was never that I would say extra level of effort to make sure that customers were actually succeeding and happy with whatever good product or service you were offering. And so I think with in my line of work, it looks like customer success has really evolved mostly out of software companies because you can go through these very long implementation phases. Oftentimes you have a group of stakeholders that end up negotiating whatever the software is that they're purchasing, but the day-to-day users, there might be a disconnect there. And so I think that's where customer success comes in, and they really understand what the goals of the day-to-day users are, what some of the challenges are, and make sure that they are just delighted and happy with whatever it is, the software or the service or the product that they're working with every day, day in and day out. So I think it's moved from babysitting, making sure accounts are happy to moving into more of this delight and excite realm.
Let's talk a little bit about how you work for a company that's overseas, not in North America, and you oversee customer success in North America. How is it similar? How is it different? Do you have to have a different strategy? Does it work differently? So tell us a little bit about what the differences are globally.
Sure. That's a really great question. So I think, the obvious challenges are that we're, 6 to 7 hours apart, depending on which team I'm working with over in Europe currently. So that's an obvious challenge, but I think we all figure out a way to make it work. If I have to jump on a little bit early, if they have to stay a little bit later, that tends not to be as much of a problem, especially as everybody is so used to working from home now, since we've all been in that life for the past year and a half. But I would say that was one of the main reasons that TVbeat decided to bring me on so far in advance of us kicking off some of our first clients here in the US, is because they really wanted me to understand and learn the business from the European perspective and then apply what I know about the US market. And so obviously the US is significantly bigger in terms of potential. I think, we all know that. And, I think that comes with really exciting things because, now the company is very focused on making things work here in the US. But it also comes with some challenges because I've been working with my UK counterparts and I'm getting a little bit more of the attention than they are necessarily. So.
What would you say are some of the key differences you see between the two, right? As far as just what customer expectations are, employee expectations, like culturally, I'm sure there's obviously a big difference too. Like, what do you see in that realm?
That's a great question. So I would say, I think, and these are generalizations of what I've experienced. I'm not saying all US companies are like this, but what we tend to experience is US have a little bit of higher expectations. They want things done almost immediately and have pretty high expectations in terms of turnaround times, getting feedback. Whereas I think more so in Europe, things tend to be a little bit more relaxed. I think there's just more of a relaxed nature over there when you're going about doing business.
Yeah.
Talking specifically about what you guys do, I know traditionally TV globally has been drastically different. Even advertising rights and rates in the US versus in London versus the rest of Europe as well. Has that really changed as we've migrated more towards digital assets and digital advertising, or is it still uniquely different? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I would say I think like one great example is businesses are very different. So in the US, cable operators, as an example, every cable operator gets 2 minutes out of every 60-minute show to sell that advertising. Where in Europe, you have to actually own the content to be able to sell advertising on that specific channel. So the power lies a lot with programmers and the content creators, more so in the US, where you could be a large cable TV operator and you don't have to create any content or own any channels, but you get to sell and see that revenue benefit just by the pure act of delivering, the service to end users and clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because the cable cos or the underlying providers have always had a lot of power in that, right? Because they control the pipe. What's changed over the years, as we all know, is just the streaming side of business, whether it's YouTube, not Spotify, but Netflix and Hulu and the other ones. What have you seen? How does that change for your business, moving from more of like the traditional way we consume television and programs to the streaming side, and how that affects the advertising?
Sure. I love this question because I think there is so much emphasis on, we tend to talk about cord cutters and everyone is moving to Netflix and Hulu and cutting their cable subscription. But at the end of the day, there might be a little bit of churn there. But TV cable operators still have massive, massive reach. And there's this great quote from Group M where they say, although streaming services receive so much of the industry's attention, traditional ad-supported television continues to do the bulk of the work supporting marketers' brand building efforts. So while we do see a little bit of shifts in terms of people going over to Netflix, if you actually look at the amount of churn that Hulu and other streaming services experience, that's a massive problem that they have to figure out and deal with. And I think the ease and comfort that people have with their traditional pay for TV subscription service, that isn't going to go anywhere. I think what's interesting, and that's where we find a lot of value is actually the shift of targeting and moving more towards that addressable linear, targeting people based on behaviors rather than based on programs.
Yeah, and that's where I guess one has an advantage over the other in that sense, right? Where you can get a lot more granular on the data with the streaming services and how people are scrolling through and what programs are clicking and things like that. But it's interesting that the David and Goliath, the Goliath is still the cable operators or the direct TVs of the world that still own a lot of that content. And I guess traditionally those big brands they're comfortable. It's the way they've been doing it for all the years it's ever been around. So it's interesting to see the difference on how that all sells and how that kind of plays out in the market.
And I think with the evolution of set-top boxes, there's so much data that traditional TV companies are getting to as well, because all of that is, hooked up to the internet, and you are seeing all this great data on people that are watching various television programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you could even go through your cable provider and link up your Netflix or Hulu, and then now they're getting double the data. They're understanding exactly what you're doing through their box. Tell us a little bit about who your core customers are, and what if you have an average customer life cycle, what is it? If not, just give us a little insight into where people begin, how they mature as a customer, and then if there's churn, how do they churn out?
Sure, that's a really good question. So we work with some of the top leading global media companies out there. Sky is a great example, across multiple countries in Europe. OSN, Proximus, Canal Plus. We have several clients here in the U.S. that we're getting started as well. And I would say the bulk of our work is the implementation phase. And so that, depending on the size of the client, can be anywhere from, depending on what they want to do, anywhere from 3 months up to a year.
Mm-hmm.
But what we really say is we have a configurable and modular SaaS solution. So if your current needs are forecasting and planning, as an example, we can definitely help you with that. You don't have to go in the predefined order of how our products are arranged. But in order, in our opinion, to really understand and grasp the complete offering that TVbeat has, we say it's a 36-month journey, because there is quite a bit of internal human onboarding that you have to work on, because you're basically creating a seismic shift within an organization. And that's where customer success is such a key to that success, for lack of a better term, because we're in there understanding what the day-to-day processes are for various teams and helping them through that. And we can all admit it's a painful process to change. It's a painful process to go from being really happy with your Excel spreadsheets to moving away from that and having everything in one unified dashboard.
Yeah, and it's always a change, right? That's the competition for anyone looking to sell into a new service or into a new company is change. The status quo, right? And if they're comfortable with that spreadsheet, it's harder to get them off of it until you can start to see like what you have to be able to cast that vision for what it's going to be able to do long term, and using that data and be able to capture all that. So once a customer is on board, it's this like 36-month journey. What sort of metrics or things do you use for just grading the health of the customer? Like, how do you know if they're on the verge of churning, or if health scores are a big one, but how do you guys kind of use that to get a gauge?
So we like to utilize surveys quite frequently, especially when we have a new product launch. We're actually experimenting with some, I don't want to use the word pop-up, but pop-ups within our application. Whenever we have something new, a new feature or a brand new module that's come out, we have little pop-ups that can come up and guide that user through whatever is new. And that's, in my mind, a really great tool, because it allows customer success to allow the client to do it on their own time. And they can get a little bit more comfortable, and then we can jump in and really dive into what has changed. And if it's a small change in terms of column headers are adjusted or we've renamed something, you don't necessarily need to have a meeting. So it helps our clients and customers actually not get inundated with meetings over a small change. But in terms of how we measure the health, it's really, having that consistent cadence with our clients and understanding how are they valuing different aspects of our business? How are their teams absorbing and utilizing the different modules that we offer? We're really able to dig in and see how frequently people are going into certain reports, into certain modules. So that's been very, very helpful. And we can be proactive and understand, hey, we've noticed this new person that just joined the team is not going into the reports that we typically see other members of your team going in. Maybe they need a refresher. Maybe they need a quick meeting just to talk through and make sure they're comfortable using our system. So I think there's several different ways, but customer success is leading that. And we are really the ones measuring how the health is.
Yeah, I like that a lot, especially, with the customer success managers being active with the customers and being able to, gauge where they're at, but also just using the platform to see, hey, they haven't logged in for 3 days, or like you can start to see trends on reports they're using or reports they're not using. It's a really great insight, just like we were talking about with the set-top boxes or the streaming. You get to see really well, like your customer and their behavior. And then you can kind of from there get a health score or whatnot. Artie, you're going to jump in and say something?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think adoption is key in measuring that adoption and helping people through self-service tools, through the product, whether it's tool tips or pop-ups or toaster trays that come out and say, hey, have you seen the new thing? Or we just changed the name of that. I have a question around that. So given that you're in the software as a service world and, adoption and making sure that people are logging in and using the tool and using certain aspects of the tool, that's extremely important. Implementation can take a really long time. That ramp up period you said can be anywhere from 3 to 12 months. How do you guys graduate them from their implementation? Like, congratulations, you've learned as much as you need to learn. Now you're in this safe place to leave the nest and just, get out of implementation and actually use the product for your benefit. How do you guys have a process for that? Is it easy? Is it hard? How do you do that?
Yeah, so we're actually in the UK, we have our own process because the implementation times aren't quite as extensive. In the US, we're currently in development of that. So it's a very apropos question. But really during implementation is where we're actually grabbing all of that, raw data from all of the different ad servers, linear trafficking systems, whatever CRM systems, whatever technology stacks they're using, we're ingesting all of that data and starting to harmonize it. So during that 3 to 12 month period, users can't go in and use the system. It's not ready yet. But once we get to that final implementation, we're good to go. We go through a pretty extensive training process where, they have us at their beck and call for the first 3 months. And obviously, once we complete implementation, there is a lot of UAT that happens to make sure everything is working to the way that they expected. And then once we graduate them, they still have us as the right-hand person. Like our goal is to be as knowledgeable about their day-to-day business as they are. Like we're essentially, in lack for a better term, sitting inside of their 4 walls, being part of their organization.
Yeah, that's interesting. I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about just a couple of things. One of the things that we hear a lot right now is just attrition and how finding good talent and finding employees right now. What are you guys doing is that a problem, or is that a challenge for your organization? And 2, if it is, how are you guys handling it? What do you see as some best practices to alleviate the attrition that so many customer success orgs are facing right now?
Sure. So I think, we're kind of having the opposite problem where we're in like high growth mode. We are expanding like crazy since I joined in May, which is roughly 6 months ago. And I think we've hired, 20 to 30 people since then. So we've been growing very aggressively. In terms of like attrition, I think because it's more of a US thing than I think a European issue right now. I would say, I think they obviously have some of the same challenges where companies are getting very aggressive about hiring and they need to hire. But I think in the US, that's where we're really seeing the challenges. And since it's just me right now, we're not really running into that problem. But it is very, very hard to hire. I will say that.
That's the challenge is, more around just finding good talent. And you're facing Austin, all the tech companies and those hubs are definitely having, hard, challenging finding those good employees or whatnot.
Right. And I think we just like the passion that we have around TVbeat and the business and where we're going. I think that is a huge draw for potential employees. That was a draw for me. I saw the rocket ship that we're getting on and about to take off. And I think the opportunity is so huge to just completely disrupt an industry that's been operating in and managing in such a manual way for so long. It just seems, it seems so logical that we would exist.
Yeah, it's primed, right? It's one of those industries where it's transforming, and you're bringing in great technology with a SaaS platform that can take it to the next level. And it's almost, there aren't many of those left out there, or at least ones that you can do easily, and not that it's easy, but ones that you can definitely take to that next level. Where do you see as far as, customer experience has always been a big hot topic, but what we're hearing lately from a lot of the thought leaders in the market is employee experience. Do you guys focus on the employee experience, looking at it linearly, where it's going to then affect the customer experience in a positive way? And how so?
Yeah, I think right now we're in a really interesting stage because we're kind of pivoting from, being maybe an adolescent to being, a grown-up, for lack of a better term. And so I think doing some of those grown-up type things, like really understanding what our company values are, really understanding how can we make TVbeat a great place to work, and where people, step on the gas pedal rather than hit the snooze button. And I think we have that passion and that energy within our engineering team. And I think trying to layer it and find ways to resonate with more of the commercially focused team, sales, customer success is something that we're on a path to try to accomplish this year.
That's great.
And you talked a lot about breaking into the U.S. market and a little bit of hyper growth right now. Sometimes that poses some scalability. Like you said, teenage years, kind of the going through that adolescence piece of the business. How are you guys doing today? Is it hard because you're getting just too much business and you have to turn things down, or are you just making things work? How are you getting scrappy and making it work?
Sure. I think, at the end of the day, we need to do what's best for the company. And so we're very strategic about the types of clients we want to engage in. And we have a plan in terms of here are the clients that we see will get the best benefit from TVbeat. Here are the quick wins that make the most sense for us as an organization. And those are the companies that we're talking to. And then there's others that definitely make sense, but probably not for another, I would say, 12 to 18 months. And so the way that we structure our conversations and who we're engaging with is very much what we can handle.
And I used to be in the software as a service, customer service world. And oftentimes when it's a product that you're supporting, you have to be very plugged into not only what your customers are saying, but also plugged into your QA and development teams to report the appropriate bug requests, feature requests, things like that, so that the developers aren't just getting a bunch of small little requests. They're actually tackling the high priority, high impact items. Do you guys have a process for that? How's the relationship between, as the middleman in customer success between your customers and your development teams?
Sure. I would say, obviously we tier any sort of request, whether it's like a like urgent, we have to fix it right away, or it's a nice to have. And we're constantly having those conversations. And we tend to work through our product team. So ideally you don't want, the customer success team and engineering necessarily working one-on-one together. You want to have that more middleman who understands kind of what the roadmap of that engineering is working on in terms of new product development, but also maintaining the current product, as well as what does the customer need? What's going to be a non-starter for us on customer success if we cannot get this thing fixed? And what's, changing a color of a button from blue to green, that's probably something that's not a huge priority. So I think we do a really good job of managing client expectations too, because that's a really big piece ahead of time. When we see something that comes through and they can't operate or they can't function, of course, we're going to get that fixed ASAP. But if it's a nice to have, we try to manage that conversation rather than promising, of course, we can do that, whatever you need.
Right.
Although it's nice to be in that position, we have to be realistic in the resources that we have.
Yeah, otherwise you just start chasing all the requests and you're not really going anywhere without the vision, right?
Yep. And you just end up getting into huge technical debt, and that really stalls your business from moving forward and being able to innovate.
Yeah. I like the technical conversation, moving it towards on the support side and what you use, the voice channels, there's email, chat, all those things for your customers to chime in and to get help. Describe a little bit about like what you're using for the channels of this omni-channel approach and what works best. Where do you see chat bots going and things like that?
Yeah, so we're looking into chatbots. We use Zendesk currently to report any sort of bugs, and then we relay those bugs back to our product and engineering teams. And that seems to be working really, really well. Zendesk has a integration within Slack, so we can kind of track everything as we're moving pretty quickly in our various Slack channels. And we're just starting to see how a chatbot could make sense for us.
Yeah, and with the way chat's going with AI and all those different things, I think one of the things we talked about before is you can take a lot of those like low-level, easy questions off the plate with AI. So then you up-level those agents to handle the more pressing concerns and the actual ones that require a human touch to it.
Yep. And I just like in my day-to-day life, it's so interesting because I have a hard time now telling, is this a bot that I'm talking to, or is this a real person? They've gotten so like Amazon. I don't know if you guys Amazon a lot, but I'm always like trying to return something or find something. And half the time I'm like, is this a bot? Is this a person? Who am I talking to?
They're getting so smart. Yeah. And we were at a conference a couple of weeks ago, Artie and I, and we were talking about the AI and with some of the vendors that were there and their chatbots or their AI platforms that they're using and just how good it's getting. And what it's doing is it's taking all those mundane, the first level of the chatbot, just take away all the mundane, the password resets, all those things that can be done with either voice, AI IVR or the chatbot, and then give the real stuff to the actual human agents and just makes everything more efficient. And you can prove ROI with it too, which is nice because you can say, okay, we deflected 30% of the phone time to the chatbot, which saved us X amount of dollars.
Yep. Yeah, I love
it's definitely an interesting market, especially in the AI world. It's getting so good that, and this is what we were talking about with one of the vendors last week at the conference, that a chatbot can understand what you're trying to say before you even hit the enter button, and it can technically cut you off and give you the answer before you even finish your sentence. So they have to put natural pauses in there as if you're speaking to like a real person who has to think and process. Otherwise, it's very off-putting if, as you're typing, it gives you a response. So things are getting pretty advanced, and even more advanced on the voice side, where it's hard to even recognize if it's a real person or if it's a synthesized voice of a person. So very intrigued to see where it goes in the future. I don't know if it's going to solve for everything, but it could be interesting to see how it solves for some very basic things.
Right. And I was at my last company I was part of, we had implemented a chatbot, and it's just so interesting how you have to train your chatbot and teach it and, just feed it with tons of information. And then at some point it's off to run and be free.
It is. It's like a little bird,
Yeah.
And we've talked to some AI specialists on the podcast, and they always say, treat it like an employee. What you put in is what you're going to get out of it, and if you put garbage in, it's going to be a garbage chatbot. They're like, oh, they don't work, this and that. But if you find a good partner, a good, supplier that can bring good support, right, help you develop it, help you add to it, get those keywords and get those, get the AI working, and then it's great. And it can really solve for some key issues.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool stuff.
I know we got a couple more questions here. We're running a little short on time, but do you have any plans for 2022? Do you have any 2022 projects or, big, hairy, audacious goals, not only for the company, but for your team? Anything you're focused on for next year?
So I think, 2022 is really going to be, as I mentioned, we're in the very early stages of implementing our US clients. So that's really what 2022 is. It's hard to say. 2022 is going to, and it's crazy that we're
hard to believe too.
My God, I feel like 2020 didn't happen. It just I don't know. But really the goal is to get those clients up and running. I need to hire client success people here in the US. They can be anywhere.
We'll put the word out.
If you need a job, a really interesting, exciting place to work, I'll be hiring like crazy here coming up in the next couple months to help support some of the efforts I'm doing. I think we're just continuing to grow, continuing to develop these partnerships that we have, and really trying to think what is the next thing that we want to create? We have all these different modules focused on campaign management, inventory management, yield management. What else could we help deliver to help our clients really just be able to operate and do their business in a more streamlined manner?
Those are some big goals, and it's not easy. Right? Onboarding new employees is daunting, but sounds like from what just having been there only since May, and you guys are still crushing it and growing like crazy, that you've got your hands full for the next few years. So
for sure.
Godspeed in those efforts.
Thank you so much.
But Lindsay, it's been absolutely a pleasure having you on and spending some time. And, thank you for just giving us a peek behind the curtains of what you're doing over at TVbeat. We love talking with customer success, and you've got a lot of great things coming down the pipe, and it's great to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks, Artie.
Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.